Imagine this. You're 8 months pregnant, pulling into your dream home after a joyful doctor's appointment, only to find a for sale sign hammered into your perfect lawn. Your husband of 15 years gone. He sold everything out from under you for his mistress. But wait, this isn't just a heartbreaking affair. It's a web of lies, fraud, international crime, and a decades-old vendetta that will shatter everything you thought you knew. From utter devastation to epic revenge watch as Sarah Mitchell rises from the ashes, turns the tables, and buys back her ex's entire empire. Twist betrayals and empowerment like you've never seen stick around till the end, because this story will blow your mind. If you're hooked already, hit that like button. If you've ever dreamed of sweet revenge, drop a comment with your biggest what would you do moment. Share this with a friend who needs some inspiration, and subscribe for more insane true story vibes like this one. Let's dive in. The golden hour sunlight streamed through the massive windows of the Mitchell estate, casting long shadows across the pristine marble floors. Sarah Mitchell, 38 and glowing with the radiance of her 32-week pregnancy, carefully maneuvered her BMW into the circular driveway. Her hands trembled with excitement as she clutched the ultrasound photos oozed from her afternoon appointment. "James, honey, you have to see these pictures," she called out, her hopes echoing through the cavernous foyer. "The doctor says she's absolutely perfect. Our little miracle is growing so beautifully." The house remained eerily silent. No warm greeting from her husband of 15 years, no excited footsteps rushing down the grand staircase to share in her joy. Something felt wrong. The pregnant wife, betrayed by silence, would soon discover the heartbreaking family drama that was about to unfold. Sarah's designer heels clicked against the marble as she made her way through their dream home, the same house where they had planned to raise their daughter, where James had promised they would grow old together. She paused at the threshold of his home office, expecting to find him buried in real estate contracts as usual. The room was empty. Walking toward the kitchen, Sarah noticed something that made her blood run cold. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, she could see a man in a bright yellow vest hammering a for sale sign into their perfectly manicured front lawn. "Excuse me," Sarah called out, rushing outside as fast as her pregnant body would allow. "There's been some mistake. This house is not for sale." The realtor, a thin man in his 50s with kind eyes, looked genuinely confused. "Ma'am, I have the listing agreement right here. James Mitchell signed it this morning. The house is priced to sell quickly at $4.2 million. Sarah's world tilted on its axis. The husband affair with Mistress scenario she had feared in her darkest moments was becoming a devastating reality. "That's impossible. I'm Sarah Mitchell. This is my home. My husband would never sell our house without telling me, especially not while I'm pregnant with our first child." The realtor's expression softened with sympathy. "Ma'am, I'm sorry, but I have all the paperwork. Mr. Mitchell said you were aware of the sale. He mentioned you both wanted a fresh start before the baby arrives." Sarah's hands shook as she pulled out her phone, dialing James's number with fingers that felt numb and disconnected from her body. The call went straight to voicemail. She tried again and again. Racing back into the house, Sarah searched desperately for any sign of James, any explanation for this nightmare. In their bedroom, she found a single sheet of paper on her pillow, written in James's familiar handwriting. "Sarah, the house is sold. I'm with Victoria now. This is for the best. The pregnancy has made you emotional and unstable. I need space to think. Don't try to contact me. My lawyer will be in touch." The paper fluttered from Sarah's hands as her knees buckled. She sank onto their king-size bed, the same bed where James had held her just last week, promising that everything would be perfect once their daughter arrived. The same bed where they had made love, where he had whispered that she was the only woman he would ever need. Sarah's eyes fell on her nightstand where her worn copy of Eat, Pray, Love sat next to a framed photo of their wedding day. Her mother had given her the book years ago, saying every woman needed to remember that she was capable of creating her own happiness. As Sarah picked up the book with trembling hands, she realized that her own journey of self-discovery was about to begin in the most painful way possible. The ultrasound photos scattered across the floor as Sarah clutched her belly, feeling her daughter's gentle kicks against her ribs. This midlife betrayal story was just beginning, and Sarah had no idea how much worse things were about to become. Sarah sat in what was once the nursery she had lovingly prepared for her daughter, surrounded by the ruins of her carefully planned life. The rain that had started during her confrontation with the realtor now streamed down the windows in thick rivulets, creating a watery curtain between her and the outside world. Baby clothes lay scattered across the hardwood floor, like fallen dreams mixed with the ultrasound photos that had brought her such joy just hours earlier. The pregnant wife, betrayed by the man she trusted most, found herself replaying every moment of the past few months, searching for signs she had missed. When had James become a stranger? When had their midlife crisis marriage transformed from loving partnership to cruel deception? Her phone rang, startling her from her spiral of grief. James's name appeared on the screen, and Sarah answered with desperate hope. James, thank God. Please tell me this is all some horrible mistake. Please tell me you're coming home. His voice was cold, mechanical, nothing like the warm tone that had once made her feel safe and cherished. Sarah, I left you a note. I thought I was clear. Clear about what? About abandoning your pregnant wife, about selling our home without my knowledge or consent. James, I don't understand what's happening. You've become comfortable, Sarah. Predictable. Victoria challenges me in ways you never could. She makes me feel alive again. Victoria. The name hits Sarah like a physical blow. Who is Victoria? James, please, just come home. We can work through whatever this is. We're having a baby. Our daughter needs her father. Victoria Sterling. She's been helping me renovate the office spaces in my downtown properties. She's brilliant, Sarah. She's everything you used to be before you got so settled. Sarah's sister Jenny had warned her about this moment years ago, quoting Dr. Phil's advice about second-chance relationships in midlife crises. Some men hit their 40s and suddenly think they need to recapture their youth by trading in their wives like old cars, Jenny had said. Sarah had laughed it off, then certain that James was different, that their love was stronger than such cliches. James, please don't do this. I love you. We built a life together. We're about to become parents. Doesn't that mean anything to you? I've already moved out, Sarah. Victoria and I have found a place together. The house sale will give us both fresh starts. You'll get half the proceeds, minus what I've already invested in new ventures. Half the proceeds of my own home. James, this house is in both our names. You can't just sell it without my signature. There was a long pause before James responded, and when he did, his voice carried a smugness that made Sarah's stomach turn. Check the papers in my desk drawer, Sarah. You signed the property transfer documents last month when you thought you were signing tax forms. My attorney drew them up. The line went dead, leaving Sarah staring at her phone in disbelief. With shaking hands, she made her way to James's home office and began rifling through his desk drawers. There, in a manila folder labeled Tax Documents 2024, she found the papers she had signed without reading carefully. Hidden among legitimate tax forms were property transfer agreements that essentially signed away her rights to their home. Sarah's vision blurred as she realized the depth of James's deception. This hadn't been a sudden decision born of midlife crisis. This had been planned, calculated, deliberate. Her husband had been plotting to leave her while she was pregnant, and she had knowingly helped him do it. The sound of a car door slamming in the driveway made Sarah's heart leap with hope. Maybe James had come to his senses. Maybe he was coming home to fix this nightmare. She rushed to the window and saw her sister Jenny hurrying up the front steps, her face etched with concern. Sarah, I've been calling you for hours, Jenny said as she burst through the front door. I heard about the for sale sign from Mrs. Patterson next door. What the hell is going on? Sarah collapsed into her sister's arms, finally allowing herself to cry. He left me, Jenny. James left me for another woman and he sold our house. I'm 32 weeks pregnant and I have nowhere to go. Jenny held her sister tightly, her own eyes filling with tears. Oh, honey, I'm so sorry. I should have seen this coming. There were signs. What signs? What do you mean? The way he's been working late every night for months. The way he stopped talking about the baby. The way he looked at other women when we were out to dinner last month. I thought about saying something, but I didn't want to plant seeds of doubt if I was wrong. Sarah pulled back to look at her sister's face. You think he's been planning this for months? Sarah, I found his credit card statements in the mailbox yesterday. They were delivered to my address by mistake. There were charges for expensive dinners at restaurants you two never went to. Hotel rooms when he was supposedly at business conferences in town. Jewelry purchases from stores you wouldn't shop at. The betrayal cut deeper with each revelation. Sarah sank onto the living room sofa, the same sofa where she and James had binged episodes of The Good Wife just weeks earlier. She had felt so sorry for Alicia Florrick dealing with her husband's public humiliation and betrayal. Now Sarah found herself living the same nightmare, except her humiliation was private, personal, and somehow even more devastating. Jenny, I need to check our bank accounts. James said something about investments and new ventures. Sarah's laptop was still on the kitchen counter, where she had left it that morning while researching baby gear online. With trembling fingers, she logged into their joint checking account. The balance showed $347. That's impossible, Sarah whispered. We had over $100,000 in that account last week. Jenny peered over her sister's shoulder at the screen. Look at the transaction history, Sarah. The recent transactions told a story of systematic financial abandonment. Large withdrawals, transfers to accounts Sarah didn't recognize, payments to companies she had never heard of. The most recent transaction was a $50,000 transfer to Sterling Design Solutions, with a note that read, Phase 2 complete. Phase 2 complete, Sarah read aloud. What the hell does that mean? As if summoned by her questions, Sarah's phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Check James's jacket pocket in the front hall closet. You deserve to know the truth about what you are really dealing with. A concerned friend. Laura's heart pounded as she made her way to the front hall closet. James's navy blazer hung there, the one he had worn to their anniversary dinner just 2 months ago. In the inside pocket, she found a business card for Sterling Design Solutions and a handwritten note in feminine script. Phase 2 complete. Time for Phase 3. Thank you for being such a useful partner. All my love, V. The pregnant wife, betrayed by her husband's calculated deception, stared at the note, understanding finally dawning. This wasn't a spontaneous affair or a midlife crisis. This was a carefully orchestrated plan, and Sarah had been nothing more than a pawn in Victoria Sterling's game. Jenny, Sarah said, her voice barely a whisper, I think I'm in even more trouble than we realized. The next morning brought no relief from the nightmare that had become Sarah's reality. She had spent the night on Jenny's couch, unable to return to the house that was no longer hers, unable to sleep as her daughter kicked restlessly against her ribs, as if sensing her mother's distress. The husband affair with Mistress had evolved into something far more sinister than Sarah could have imagined. I'm going with you, Jenny announced over breakfast, watching Sarah push scrambled eggs around her plate. You're not confronting this Victoria woman alone. I need to understand what's happening, Jenny. That note, it sounded like James and I were both just pieces in some larger game. Sterling Design Solutions occupied the entire top floor of a gleaming downtown office building, the kind of upscale space that screamed success and sophistication. The elevator ride to the 20th floor felt like an eternity, giving Sarah time to study her reflection in the polished steel doors. Dark circles under her eyes, pale-skinned hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. She looked exactly like what she was, a pregnant woman whose world had collapsed overnight. The reception area was a study in modern elegance, all clean lines and expensive artwork. A young woman with perfectly styled blonde hair looked up from her desk with a practiced smile. Good morning. How can I help you? I'm here to see Victoria Sterling. I'm Sarah Mitchell. The receptionist's smile faltered slightly. I'm sorry, but Ms. Sterling doesn't see clients without appointments. I'm not a client, Sarah said, her voice gaining strength. I'm the pregnant wife of the man she's been sleeping with. Before the receptionist could respond, a door at the far end of the reception area opened and a woman stepped out. Victoria Sterling is everything Sarah was not: tall, sleek, polished. Her dark hair was cut in a severe bob that somehow made her look both professional and dangerous. She wore a tailored black dress that probably cost more than Sarah's monthly grocery budget. Sarah Mitchell, Victoria said, her voice smooth and confident. I've been expecting you. You've been expecting me. Of course, I imagine you have questions. Victoria gestured toward her office. Please come in, both of you. Victoria's office was a testament to ambition realized. Awards and accolades covered one wall, while the others featured architectural drawings and before and after photos of stunning interior renovations. A massive desk dominated the space, and Sarah noticed that it held a framed photo of James. Please sit, Victoria said, settling behind her desk like a queen holding court. I suppose you want to know how long James and I have been together. I want to know why, Sarah said, surprised by the steadiness in her own voice. I want to know why you targeted my husband, why you destroyed my family. Victoria's laugh was like ice crystals falling. Targeted Sarah, you give me too much credit. James came to me, remember? He hired Sterling Design Solutions to renovate his office spaces. I simply provided comprehensive services. The note in his jacket pocket mentioned phases. This was planned. Of course it was planned. Nothing worth having ever happens by accident. Victoria leaned forward, her eyes glittering with something that might have been excitement. Did you really think a man like James would stay satisfied with suburban domesticity forever? Did you think that because you were carrying his child, you had some kind of permanent claim on his attention? Jenny reached for Sarah's hand, squeezing it in support. Sarah could feel her sister's anger radiating through the gesture, but she forced herself to remain calm. How long have you been sleeping with my husband? 8 months, since the day we met, actually. James has such vigor for a man in his 40s. Much more than I expected from someone so trapped in domestic mediocrity. The words hit Sarah like physical blows, but she pressed on. The business card note mentioned phase 3. What's phase 3? Victoria's smile was predatory. Smart question. Phase 1 was establishing our personal relationship while I gained access to James's business operations. Phase 2 was removing obstacles to our future together. That would be you and your claim on his assets. And phase 3, expansion. James has built an impressive real estate portfolio, but he lacks vision. He's been playing it safe for too long, making conservative investments that barely maximize his potential. I've identified opportunities for growth that he never would have considered on his own. Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the office's aggressive air conditioning. What kind of opportunities? The kind that require significant capital investment. The kind that require a man to be free from the financial obligations of supporting a wife and child. The heartbreaking family drama was revealing itself to be something even more calculated than Sarah had feared. Victoria hadn't just stolen her husband, she had stolen him for his money. There's something else you should know, Victoria continued, reaching into her desk drawer. She pulled out a manila envelope and slithered it across the desk. I wasn't entirely honest when I said James came to me first. Sarah opened the envelope with trembling hands. Inside were printed emails dating back over a year of correspondence between Victoria and a private investigator detailing James's daily routines, his business practices, his financial holdings, and his personal relationships. You had him investigated before you ever met him. Due diligence, Dara. I don't enter into any relationship without understanding exactly what I'm getting into. James Mitchell was identified as an ideal candidate for partnership based on his financial portfolio, his lack of sophisticated business advisors, and his obvious dissatisfaction with his personal life. His dissatisfaction with his peers' personal life? Victoria's expression turned almost pitying. Sarah, you're a lovely woman, I'm sure. But you're also predictable, comfortable, safe. Men like James don't want safe. They want to be challenged, inspired, pushed to achieve more than they thought possible. You offered him domesticity, I offered him empire. The meeting continued for another 20 minutes, each revelation more devastating than the last. Victoria explained how she had researched James's business contacts, his financial vulnerabilities, his psychological profile. She had approached him with a business proposal that had been carefully crafted to appeal to his specific ambitions and insecurities. As Sarah and Jenny finally left the office building, Sarah felt as though she was seeing the world through new eyes. This wasn't the midlife betrayal story she had assumed it was. This was something far more sophisticated and ruthless. Sarah, Jenny said as they stood on the sidewalk outside the building, there's something else we need to discuss. What do you mean? The way Victoria talked about James's financial portfolio, the way she mentioned expansion and capital investment, it sounded like she knows more about his business than she should. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from her lawyer friend Diane. Can you meet this afternoon? I've been looking into the property transfer documents you sent me. There are some irregularities we need to discuss immediately. As they drove toward Diane's office, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that Victoria's master plan was even more complex than what had been revealed. The pregnant wife betrayed by her husband was beginning to understand that she might also be the victim of something that bordered on financial fraud. Jenny, Sarah said as they pulled into the parking garage, I think we're going to need more help than just a divorce lawyer. The investigation into James's sudden wealth and Victoria's sophisticated business operations was about to reveal connections that would change everything Sarah thought she knew about her husband's success and her own vulnerability. Diane Foster's law office occupied a modest suite in a professional building downtown, a far cry from the gleaming tower where Victoria Sterling held court. But Diane's 25 years of family law experience had taught her to recognize predatory patterns that glossier attorneys might miss. She spread James's property transfer documents across her conference table like evidence at a crime scene. Sarah, these documents are fraudulent, Diane said without preamble. The signatures don't match your usual signing patterns, and the notary seal is fake. Sarah felt a momentary surge of hope, the first she had experienced in days. So the house sale isn't legal. The house sale itself is legal because James had power of attorney rights that you granted him 3 years ago for business purposes. But these transfer documents that supposedly removed your ownership rights, they're worthless. What does that mean? It means you still legally own 50% of that house regardless of what James told you. But Sarah, there's something else. Diane's expression grew grave. I ran James's name through the county property records database. In the past 6 months, he's been transferring ownership of multiple properties to offshore shell companies. Jenny leaned forward. Is that legal? It's not illegal, but it's highly suspicious, especially when combined with these falsified documents. Sarah, I think your husband has been planning to hide assets from you for much longer than you realized. Sarah's momentary hope began to crumble. How much are we talking about? Based on what I can find in public records, James has moved approximately $8 million worth of real estate assets offshore. But I suspect that's just what I can trace. There could be much more. The financial hardship after betrayal was beginning to take shape as something far more devastating than a simple divorce settlement. Sarah was learning that her husband hadn't just left her. He had systematically robbed her. Diane, I need to ask you something that might sound crazy. Is it possible that Victoria Sterling has been helping James hide these assets? Why do you ask? Sarah told Diane about her meeting with Victoria, about the private investigator reports about the calculated nature of their relationship. As she spoke, she watched Diane's expression grow increasingly concerned. Sarah, or what you're describing sounds like a sophisticated financial fraud scheme. If Victoria targeted James specifically for his assets and has been helping him move money offshore, this isn't just about adultery anymore. This could be criminal. As if summoned by their conversation, Sarah's phone rang. The caller ID showed the name of her temporary apartment complex. Miss Mitchell, this is Janet from Riverside Manor. I'm calling about your rent payment. It was due yesterday and our records show the automatic payment was declined. Sarah's stomach dropped. That's impossible. The payment comes directly from my joint account with my husband. I'm sorry, ma'am, but we've had several attempts to process the payment and they've all been declined for insufficient funds. We need to receive payment within 24 hours or we'll have to begin eviction proceedings. After hanging up, Sarah immediately called her bank. The news was devastating, but not surprising. James had emptied their joint checking account the previous evening, transferring the remaining funds to an account she couldn't access. He's cutting off my access to money. Sarah said, her voice barely a whisper. He's trying to force me into homelessness while I'm pregnant. The first consecutive catastrophe was just the beginning. 2 hours later, while meeting with a financial advisor that Diane had recommended, Sarah began experiencing sharp abdominal pains. The stress of the past few days, combined with the financial devastation she was facing, had pushed her body beyond its limits. Sarah, we need to get you to the hospital right now, Jenny said, watching her sister double over in pain. The emergency room at St. Mary's Hospital was a blur of bright lights and concerned voices. Sarah found herself alone in a sterile room, connected to monitors that tracked both her vital signs and her baby's heartbeat. The sound of her daughter's irregular heartbeat filled the room, a staccato rhythm that matched Sarah's own anxiety. Mrs. Mitchell, your blood pressure is dangerously elevated, Dr. Sarah Kim explained, reviewing the test results. We're going to need to keep you overnight for observation. The stress you're experiencing is affecting both you and your baby. As Sarah lay in the hospital bed connected to an IV drip, and listening to the beeping monitors, she felt more alone than she ever had in her life. James hadn't answered any of her calls. Her marriage was over, her home was sold, she was facing eviction, and now her pregnancy was at risk. The third consecutive catastrophe arrived via Jenny's laptop the next morning. "Sarah, you need to see this," Jenny said, her face pale as she held up the screen. The local news website featured a prominent story with the headline, "Real Estate Mogul's Messy Divorce Rocks Local Business Community." The article included a large photo of Sarah taken during one of her hospital visits, looking exhausted and disheveled. The caption read, "Pregnant wife of successful businessman James Mitchell seeks shelter after shocking abandonment." How did they get this photo? How do they even know about our situation? Jenny scrolled through the article, which detailed James's real estate empire, his relationship with successful interior designer Victoria Sterling, and Sarah's current unstable emotional state following the divorce proceedings. Sarah, look at this quote. The article included a statement from Victoria Sterling's publicist. "Ms. Sterling and Mr. Mitchell are focused on building their future together and their expanding business partnership. They wish Mr. Mitchell's estranged wife well during this difficult transition and hope she can find the help she needs for her emotional struggles." Sarah felt as though she had been punched in the stomach. Not only had Victoria stolen her husband and helped him steal her money, but now she was publicly humiliating her by suggesting Sarah was mentally unstable. "Who gave them this story?" Sarah asked. "I think I know," Jenny said grimly, showing Sarah the byline. "This was written by Mark Stevens. He's been the business reporter for the Tribune for 15 years. He doesn't usually cover divorce stories unless someone specifically feeds him information." "You think Victoria called him?" "I think Victoria has been planning this public humiliation as carefully as she planned everything else." Dr. Martinez arrived for Sarah's afternoon therapy session, a service Diane had arranged given the trauma Sarah was experiencing. Dr. Helen Martinez specialized in midlife reinvention and had worked with hundreds of women navigating similar crises. "Sarah, I want you to understand something important," Dr. Martinez said as they sat in the hospital's small counseling room. "What you're experiencing isn't just betrayal, it's systematic psychological and financial abuse designed to make you feel powerless." "I do feel powerless." "That's exactly what they want. But Sarah, I've read your background. You have a master's degree in business administration from Northwestern. You graduated summa cum laude. You manage the financial aspects of James's early real estate investments. You're not powerless. You've just been made to feel that way." Dr. Martinez pulled out a piece of paper with a quote printed on it. "I want you to keep this with you and read it whenever you feel overwhelmed. It's from Maya Angelou, Still I Rise. You may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. You may trod me in the very dirt, but still like dust I rise." As Sarah read the words, something shifted inside her. The pregnant wife, betrayed by her husband's calculated cruelty, was beginning to remember that she had once been a force to be reckoned with. "Dr. Martinez, I need to ask you something. Is it possible for someone to recover from this level of financial devastation?" "Not just possible, Sarah. In my experience, women who survive this kind of systematic abuse often become more successful than they ever imagined possible. But it requires you to stop thinking of yourself as a victim and start thinking of yourself as a warrior." That evening, as Sarah prepared to leave the hospital, her private investigator called with news that would change everything. "Sarah, I've been digging deeper into James's offshore investments. Viktor Kozlov, the Russian investor I mentioned, isn't just a business partner. He's connected to money laundering operations in 3 countries. If James has been working with him, your husband might be unknowingly involved in international financial crimes." The legal battles ahead were about to become far more complex than a simple divorce case. Sarah was learning that her husband's betrayal might have put them both in the crosshairs of federal investigators. As she gathered her belongings to leave the hospital, Sarah made a decision that would alter the course of everything that followed. She was going to fight back. The midlife betrayal story that had begun with her devastating discovery was about to become a tale of resurrection and revenge. Sarah's temporary refuge at Jenny's modest townhouse became the unlikely headquarters for what felt like a military operation. The dining room table was covered with legal documents, financial records, and printouts from her private investigator. The pregnant wife betrayed by systematic fraud was transforming into something her husband had never seen before, a woman with nothing left to lose and everything to gain. I can't believe I lived with him for 15 years and never noticed how calculating he could be, Sarah said, sorting through credit card statements that revealed months of deception. Jenny poured them both cups of herbal tea, her own divorce papers scattered nearby. Sarah, we were both trained to trust. Mom always told us that marriage meant believing in your partner completely. She never warned us that some partners aren't worthy of that trust. The sisterly bonding over late-night document reviews had revealed something unexpected. Jenny was also discovering her own strength through her divorce from her emotionally abusive husband. The two sisters, both in their late 30s, were learning to support each other in ways they never had before. I found something today, Jenny said, pulling out a manila folder. Remember when James used to travel to those business conferences? The ones where he said wives weren't invited. Sarah nodded, remembering how hurt she had felt being excluded from what seemed like important professional events. I called the conference centers. Sarah, half of those conferences never existed. James was lying about his business trips for over 2 years. The revelation felt like another small piece of a larger puzzle clicking into place. Sarah's therapy with Dr. Martinez had helped her understand that James's deception hadn't been a recent development triggered by midlife crisis. It had been a long-term pattern of systematic manipulation. Jenny, I need to tell you about the support group Dr. Martinez recommended. The one for women dealing with the financial abuse. It's more than that. These women have been through exactly what we're experiencing, and some of them have rebuilt their lives in incredible ways. The next evening, Sarah attended her first meeting of the support group held in the basement of a community center downtown. The room was simple but welcoming, with folding chairs arranged in a circle and motivational posters covering the walls. Maria Rodriguez, 41, was a high school teacher who had discovered her ex-husband had been stealing from her classroom supply budget to fund his gambling addiction. When I found out, I thought my career was over, she told the group. But I learned that being a victim and being a survivor are two completely different things. Beth Chen, 47, had survived bankruptcy when her ex-husband's business partner embezzled their entire savings. The day I realized I could live on pasta and determination was the day I started building my real life, she said with a laugh that carried years of hard-won wisdom. Claire Williams, 39, was a single mother who had built a successful consulting business after her ex-husband left her with 3 children and $40,000 in debt. The best revenge is a life well lived and a bank account he could never dream of having, she said. Each woman's story resonated with Sarah in different ways, but it was their collective strength that made the biggest impact. These weren't broken victims. They were warriors who had faced devastation and emerged stronger. Sarah, Maria said after the formal meeting ended, Claire mentioned you have a business background. Have you thought about using your skills to investigate James's financial activities? I wouldn't know where to start. Actually, you would, Claire interjected. You managed his early investments right. You probably know his business patterns better than anyone. And with your MBA, you have the analytical skills to trace complex financial transactions. Beth pulled out her laptop. Let me show you something. After my divorce, I learned about digital forensics. There are ways to track hidden assets that most people don't know about. For the next 2 hours, the women taught Sarah techniques for investigating financial fraud. Maria showed her how to use social media to trace business connections. Beth demonstrated online tools for researching corporate structures and ownership. Claire explained how to identify red flags in financial documents that might indicate money laundering. The key, Claire explained, is to stop thinking like a wife who trusted her husband and start thinking like a detective who suspects her target of fraud. Sarah felt a surge of empowerment unlike anything she had experienced since her world collapsed. The female empowerment she was discovering wasn't just about emotional healing. It was about reclaiming her intellectual capabilities and using them as weapons. When Sarah returned to Jenny's house that night, she was carrying a new sense of purpose, along with several notebooks full of investigative strategies. But the emotional peak of utter despair was waiting for her. Jenny met her at the door with tears in her eyes. Sarah, something happened while you were at the meeting. What now? James had you banned from the country club and the church and the book club you've been part of for 8 years. He told them you've been having emotional breakdowns and might be dangerous. The social isolation hit Sarah harder than the financial devastation had. The country club where she had played tennis every Tuesday for 10 years, the church where she had volunteered for countless charity events, the book club where she had found intellectual stimulation and friendship, all of it was gone. He's trying to destroy not just my financial security, but my entire social identity, Sarah said, sinking onto Jenny's couch. It gets worse. Mrs. Patterson called. She said James told the neighbors that you've been stalking him and Victoria. He's trying to make everyone believe you're mentally unstable. The systematic destruction of Sarah's reputation felt like the cruelest betrayal yet. James wasn't just leaving her. He was ensuring that she would have no support system, no community, no credibility when she tried to fight back. That night, Sarah stood outside the country club gates in the pouring rain, watching through the fence as people she had considered friends enjoyed their evening dinner service. The security guard who had known her for years wouldn't even make eye contact as he turned her away. The pregnant wife, betrayed by her husband's comprehensive destruction of her life, felt the full weight of her isolation. She was 8 months pregnant, effectively homeless, financially cut off, and now socially ostracized. The midlife crisis marriage that had once seemed so solid had revealed itself to be a carefully constructed illusion. But as Sarah stood in the rain watching her former life continue without her, something remarkable happened. Instead of feeling defeated, she felt angry. And anger, Dr. Martinez had taught her, was far more useful than despair. Returning to Jenny's house, Sarah made a decision that would change everything. She was going to stop grieving the life James had stolen from her and start building the life she deserved. Jenny, she said, pulling out her old business school transcripts, look at this. The transcripts showed a magna cum laude graduate with a 3.9 GPA in special recognition in financial analysis and strategic planning. Sarah stared at the documents, remembering the ambitious young woman who had earned those grades. I'd forgotten how smart I used to be, Sarah said quietly. You're still that smart, Sarah. You just let James convince you to hide it. The therapy and self-discovery process was revealing something important, and Sarah hadn't lost her abilities during her marriage. She had simply stopped using them. The woman who had once analyzed complex financial models and developed strategic business plans was still there, buried under years of domestic routine. That night, Sarah found a USB drive in James's belongings that Jenny had rescued from the house before the sale was finalized. The drive was password protected, but Sarah remembered James's typical password patterns from their shared accounts. When the files opened, Sarah found herself looking at the blueprint for her own destruction. Encrypted documents detailed offshore investments, shell company structures, and financial transfers that painted a picture of systematic asset hiding that had been going on for over a year. But most shocking was a folder labeled Phase 3 Implementation that contained business plans for a series of real estate developments funded entirely with money that should have been considered marital assets. Jenny, Sarah said, her voice filled with grim satisfaction. I think James just gave me everything I need to destroy him. The female empowerment that had been building through therapy and support group participation was about to become something far more tangible, the tools for legal and financial warfare. Sarah was no longer just a betrayed wife seeking survival. She was becoming a strategist, planning victory. The encrypted files on James's USB drive revealed a level of sophisticated financial manipulation that stunned even Sarah's business-trained mind. Working late into the night with Claire's guidance, Sarah began to understand the scope of what her husband had been planning. Look at this, Sarah said, pointing to a spreadsheet on Claire's laptop screen. James has been transferring assets to offshore accounts for 18 months. This isn't a recent decision triggered by meeting Victoria. This was planned before I even got pregnant. Claire's expertise in financial consulting proved invaluable as they decoded the complex web of shell companies and international transfers. Sarah, your husband hasn't just been hiding assets from you. He's been setting up a completely parallel financial life. These companies in the Cayman Islands, these investments in Eastern European real estate developments, this is the infrastructure for permanently relocating wealth. The midlife betrayal story was revealing itself to be something far more sinister than Sarah had imagined. This wasn't a man who had fallen in love and made impulsive decisions. This was a man who had been systematically preparing to abandon his pregnant wife while ensuring she would have no claim on the wealth they had built together. But Claire, there's something else here that doesn't make sense. Look at these investor names. The documents listed Viktor Kozlov as a primary partner in several of James's offshore ventures, But there were other names as well. Russian and Ukrainian investors, companies with addresses in countries Sarah had never heard James mention. Sarah, I think you need to call that FBI agent your investigator mentioned. This looks like more than just asset hiding. This looks like money laundering. The health scare that had sent Sarah to the hospital the previous week had been a warning sign her body couldn't ignore. The stress of uncovering the depth of James's betrayal, combined with the physical demands of advanced pregnancy, was pushing her beyond her limits. I can't keep doing this, Sarah said, feeling dizzy as she stood up from Claire's kitchen table. My blood pressure is still dangerously high, and I'm supposed to be on bed rest. Then we need to get you help that doesn't require you to do all the investigative work yourself, Claire said practically. Sarah, you have evidence of potential federal crimes. You need to turn this over to people who can handle it professionally. Martinez's afternoon therapy session focused on helping Sarah process the psychological impact of discovering that her entire marriage had been built on lies. Sarah, what you're experiencing is a form of betrayal trauma that goes beyond typical infidelity, Dr. Martinez explained. You're not just grieving the loss of your husband's love, you're grieving the discovery that the person you thought you knew never really existed. I keep trying to remember if there were signs I missed, but then I realized that James was deliberately hiding his true self from me for years. How do you recover from finding out your whole life was a lie? By refusing to let his lies define your future. Sarah, you have a choice. You can spend the rest of your life trying to understand why James deceived you, or you can focus your energy on building something better than what he destroyed. The therapy sessions were helping Sarah understand that her healing process needed to be active rather than passive. Instead of waiting to recover from James's betrayal, she needed to create new purpose and meaning in her life. Dr. Martinez, I've been thinking about something. What if I could help other women who are going through similar situations? What if I could use my business background and what I'm learning about financial investigation to offer consulting services to women dealing with financial abuse? That's an excellent idea, Sarah. There's nothing more healing than transforming your trauma into a tool for helping others. That evening, Sarah received an unexpected visitor. Her mother, Helen Mitchell, arrived from Phoenix with 2 suitcases and a determined expression. Sarah, honey, I'm sorry it took me so long to get here, Helen said, embracing her pregnant daughter. I've been dealing with some family business, but I should have come immediately when Jenny called. Mom, you didn't need to fly all the way here. I know this is hard for you too. Sarah, there's something I need to tell you about your father's estate, something I should have mentioned years ago. Helen explained that Sarah's father had left a substantial inheritance that had been held in trust managed by a family lawyer in Phoenix. The trust had been generating income for over 20 years, and Sarah was entitled to access the principal now that she was facing financial hardship. How much money are we talking about, Mom? $50,000 plus accumulated interest. It's not a fortune, but it's enough to give you options James can't control. The hidden savings that Sarah had forgotten about felt like a lifeline thrown to a drowning woman. For the first time since her world collapsed, she had access to money that James couldn't steal or freeze. But as Sarah was processing this unexpected good news, she discovered something that made her blood run cold. Victoria Sterling had somehow gained access to the support group meeting Sarah attended. She's been recording our sessions, Beth told Sarah urgently over the phone. Maria noticed her car in the parking lot during last night's meeting, and when we checked, we found a digital recording device hidden under one of the chairs. Why would Victoria want to record our support group meetings? Think about it, Sarah. If she's been working with James to destroy your credibility, recordings of you discussing your emotional struggles could be used against you in custody proceedings. The discovery that Victoria had been infiltrating Sarah's safe space felt like a violation that went beyond even the financial fraud. Victoria wasn't just stealing Sarah's husband and money, she was stealing her privacy and her healing process. Beth, we need to be more careful about where and how we communicate. Agreed. But Sarah, this also tells us something important. Victoria is worried about something. People don't go to these lengths unless they feel threatened. That night, Sarah's phone rang with a call that would change everything. The caller ID showed FBI. Mrs. Mitchell, this is Special Agent David Reyes. I understand you may have information relevant to an ongoing federal investigation. Agent Reyes explained that the FBI had been investigating Viktor Kozlov's financial operations for 3 years, focusing on suspected money laundering through real estate investments in the United States. Mrs. Mitchell, we believe your husband may be either a co-conspirator in these operations or an unwitting participant being used to legitimize illegal financial transfers. Agent Reyes, I have documentation that might be helpful to your investigation. We'd like to meet with you as soon as possible. But Mrs. Mitchell, I need to warn you that if your husband is involved in criminal activity, you could also be at risk. These are dangerous people who don't hesitate to eliminate threats to their operations. As Sarah hung up the phone, she felt the weight of a decision that would determine not just her financial future, but potentially her safety and that of her unborn daughter. The pregnant wife betrayed by her husband's criminal associations was about to become a federal witness in an international money laundering investigation. The legal battles ahead were no longer just about divorce proceedings and asset division. Sarah was entering a world where the stakes were measured not just in dollars, but in lives. The FBI field office downtown felt like something from a movie, all glass and steel, and serious-faced agents moving with purpose. Sarah sat in a sterile conference room, her hands folded over her 8-month pregnant belly, while Agent David Reyes spread photos and documents across the table. Mrs. Mitchell, I need you to look at these photos and tell me if you recognize any of these people, Agent Reyes said. The first photo showed Viktor Kozlov at what appeared to be a business dinner. He was a heavy-set man in his 60s with salt and pepper hair and calculating eyes. The second photo made Sarah's heart stop. That's Victoria, she said, pointing to a younger woman seated next to Victor. But this photo looks like it was taken years ago. She looks like she's in her early 20s. This photo was taken in Brighton Beach, New York in 2008. The woman you know as Victoria Sterling was then known as Victoria Kozlova. She's Victor's daughter. Sarah felt the room spin around her. The husband affair with Mistress had just revealed itself to be something far more sinister and complex than she had ever imagined. You're telling me that Victoria is Victor's daughter, that this entire relationship with James was orchestrated by a family of criminals. That's exactly what we're telling you. Victoria Kozlova changed her name and created a new identity when she moved to the city 5 years ago. Everything about her relationship with your husband appears to have been planned as part of a larger operation to gain access to legitimate real estate businesses for money laundering purposes. Agent Reyes continued to lay out photos and documents that painted a picture of systematic targeting and manipulation. Victoria had researched James's business operations, his personal vulnerabilities, and his financial structure before ever making contact with him. The interior design business is real, Agent Reyes explained, but it's primarily a front for gaining access to high-value real estate investors. Victoria targets successful but naive businessmen who can be manipulated into providing cover for illegal financial operations. But James thinks he's in love with her. James is a useful fool, Mrs. Mitchell. Victor and Victoria have been cultivating him for over a year, making him feel special and important, while gradually gaining control over his business decisions. The betrayal layers were revealing themselves like an archaeological dig, each level more devastating than the last. Sarah had thought her husband had betrayed her for love. Then she had discovered it was for money and ambition. Now she was learning that he had been systematically manipulated by professional criminals who had never cared about him at all. Agent Reyes, there's something else you need to know. Sarah told him about the USB drive, about the offshore investments, about Victoria's infiltration of her support group. With each detail, Agent Reyes's expression grew more serious. Mrs. Mitchell, you and your unborn child may be in immediate danger. If Victor and Victoria realize that you have access to documentation that could expose their operation, they won't hesitate to eliminate that threat. Are you saying they would hurt my baby? I'm saying these are people who have killed to protect smaller secrets than what you've uncovered. The FBI offered Sarah protective custody, but she refused. I want to help you build a case against them. I want them to pay for what they've done to my family. Mrs. Mitchell, that would require you to wear a wire to have direct contact with both Victor and your husband. Given your advanced pregnancy and the stress you've already endured, it's an unreasonable risk. Agent Reyes, these people have destroyed my life, stolen my husband, and manipulated him into stealing my money. They've turned him into a criminal and made me complicit in their crimes without my knowledge. I want justice. The decision to become an active participant in the FBI investigation felt both terrifying and empowering. Sarah was no longer just a victim trying to survive her husband's betrayal. She was becoming an agent in bringing down the criminals who had orchestrated her destruction. But the emotional peak of utter despair was still to come. That evening, Sarah returned to Jenny's house to find James waiting in the living room. For a moment, her heart leaped with irrational hope. Maybe he had come to his senses. Maybe he was ready to end this nightmare and come home. "Sarah, we need to talk," James said, looking more haggard than she had ever seen him. "James, where have you been? I've been trying to reach you for days. I've been thinking about us, about the baby, about what I've done." For a moment, Sarah allowed herself to believe that her husband had finally seen through Victoria's manipulation. But then she noticed the manila folder in his hands. "Sarah, I found some things in Victoria's apartment that I think you need to see." James opened the folder and pulled out photographs that made Sarah's blood run cold. They were pictures of her father taken shortly before his death when Sarah was 12 years old. But her father wasn't alone in the photos. He was meeting with a young man who looked exactly like Viktor Kozlov. Victoria had these hidden in a safe in her bedroom, James said, his voice shaking. Sarah, I think Victor has been planning this for much longer than any of us realized." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I think your father's car accident wasn't an accident. I think Victor killed your father, and this entire operation has been about revenge against your family, not just about money laundering." The photos showed Sarah's father, Thomas Richardson, meeting with Victor in what appeared to be a business setting. Additional documents in the folder revealed that Thomas had been investigating irregularities in real estate transactions involving Eastern European investors 26 years ago. "Your father was an honest man, Sarah. He was trying to expose Victor's early money laundering operations. Victor had him killed to protect his business and then spent 26 years planning revenge against his family." Sarah felt her legs give way as she sank onto Jenny's couch. The heartbreaking family drama that had begun with her husband's betrayal was revealing itself to be the culmination of a decades-long vendetta that had started with her father's murder. "James, why are you telling me this? Why now?" "Because I just realized that Victoria never loved me. She's been using me to get to you. The whole relationship, the affair, convincing me to leave you, it was all about positioning you for maximum vulnerability so Victor could destroy your father's daughter the same way your father tried to destroy his business." The ultimate betrayal layer was finally revealed. Sarah hadn't just been the collateral damage in her husband's midlife crisis. She had been the primary target of a criminal organization seeking revenge for her father's integrity. "James, I'm going into labor," Sarah said, feeling a sharp pain in her abdomen. "What?" "But it's too early. The baby's coming now." As James rushed Sarah to the hospital, she realized that her daughter was about to be born into a world where her family was under attack by dangerous criminals who had already killed once and wouldn't hesitate to kill again. The emergency C-section at 35 weeks felt like both an ending and a beginning. As Sarah slipped into unconsciousness under anesthesia, she didn't know that James was signing papers that would give Victoria Sterling power of attorney over her medical decisions while she was unable to advocate for herself. The pregnant wife, betrayed by her husband's manipulation, was about to become a mother fighting to protect her child from criminals who had orchestrated her family's destruction across 2 generations. Sarah woke up in the recovery room to the sound of tiny, rapid breathing. Through the fog of anesthesia and exhaustion, she focused on the source of the sound, a small plastic incubator next to her bed containing the most beautiful baby she had ever seen. "Sophia," Sarah whispered, her voice hoarse from the breathing tube. "My little Sophia." The NICU nurse smiled as she checked the monitors. "She's doing wonderfully for a 35-week baby. Strong lungs, good reflexes. She's a fighter just like her mama." As Sarah reached through the incubator's porthole to touch her daughter's impossibly small hand, she felt something she hadn't experienced in months, pure, uncomplicated joy. Sophia's tiny fingers wrapped around Sarah's index finger with surprising strength, and in that moment, Sarah knew exactly what she was fighting for. "Mrs. Mitchell." A woman in a dark suit entered the room. "I'm Detective Linda Morrison with the County Sheriff's Department. I need to speak with you about some documents that were signed while you were in surgery." Sarah's post-surgical euphoria evaporated instantly. "What documents?" "Your husband signed papers giving Victoria Sterling temporary power of attorney over your medical care and decision-making regarding your daughter. The hospital is required to honor those documents unless you can prove they were signed under fraudulent circumstances. The female empowerment that had been building through months of betrayal and discovery crystallized into laser-focused determination. Detective Morrison, those documents are fraudulent, and I can prove it. But first, I need you to ensure that Victoria Sterling has no access to my daughter. Ma'am, without a court order, I can't override legal power of attorney documents. Then get me a court order. In the meantime, I want security cameras on this room, and I want my sister Jenny listed as the only person authorized to make decisions for me if I'm unable to do so myself. Dr. Martinez arrived within hours of Sarah's request, bringing with her a team of advocates from the Women's Crisis Center where she volunteered. The legal battle that ensued was swift and decisive. Your Honor, Sarah's emergency attorney argued before the family court judge. These power of attorney documents were signed while Mrs. Mitchell was under general anesthesia and unable to consent. Furthermore, we have evidence that Victoria Sterling is not who she claims to be and is currently under federal investigation for financial crimes. Victoria's lawyer attempted to argue that James had legal authority as Sarah's husband to make medical decisions on her behalf, but Diane Foster had done her homework. The fraudulent property documents the evidence of systematic financial abuse, and James's involvement with criminals under federal investigation painted a picture of a man who could not be trusted with anyone's welfare. The judge's ruling was unambiguous. All power of attorney rights are revoked immediately. Mrs. Mitchell retains full decision-making authority over herself and her minor child. Mr. Mitchell's visitation rights are suspended pending investigation of the criminal allegations. As Sarah held Sophia in her arms that evening, she realized that becoming a mother had fundamentally changed her perspective on everything that had happened. This wasn't just about recovering from betrayal anymore. It was about building a safe and prosperous future for her daughter. Jenny, Sarah said as her sister helped her navigate the breast pump machinery, I've made a decision about my business plan. What do you mean? Dr. Martinez helped me understand that my healing process needs to be active, not passive. I'm going to start a consulting firm that helps women investigate and recover from financial abuse. Sarah, you're exhausted. You just had major surgery and you're dealing with federal investigators. Don't you think starting a business right now might be overwhelming? Jenny, I have an MBA in financial analysis. I've spent months learning investigation techniques from the FBI, and I have firsthand experience with every type of financial fraud and manipulation these women are likely to encounter. Plus, I have something James and Victoria never counted on. What's that? I'm angry, really truly angry. And anger is excellent fuel for building something great. Sarah's business plan took shape over the following weeks. Phoenix Rising Consulting would offer comprehensive services to women escaping financial abuse, asset investigation, legal document analysis, divorce strategy, and post-separation financial planning. Her first client came through the support group. Maria introduced Sarah to Carmen Rodriguez, a 43-year-old nurse whose husband had been secretly refinancing their home to fund his gambling addiction. Mrs. Rodriguez, I can help you trace exactly where your money went and develop a strategy for protecting your remaining assets, Sarah explained during their first consultation. But I need you to understand that this isn't just about recovering money. It's about ensuring you never again find yourself vulnerable to this type of abuse. Working with Carmen proved therapeutic for Sarah in ways she hadn't expected. Using her business skills to help another woman reclaim her financial independence felt like reclaiming her own power. The FBI investigation was moving forward with Sarah's cooperation. Agent Reyes had arranged for her to wear a wire during a meeting with Victor Kozlov, who had requested to meet with her directly. Mrs. Mitchell, Victor wants to negotiate, Agent Reyes explained. He's offering to return James's assets in exchange for your silence about his business operations. He's worried about what I know. He should be. Your documentation of the offshore transfers combined with our investigation is enough to bring him federal charges. But Sarah, this meeting is dangerous. Victor is desperate, and desperate criminals make unpredictable choices. Agent Reyes, this man killed my father and spent 26 years planning to destroy me. I want him to pay for what he's done. The meeting with Victor took place in a downtown restaurant, a public place that the FBI could easily monitor. Sarah wore a wire hidden in her nursing bra, an ironic touch that made her feel powerful rather than vulnerable. Viktor Kozlov in person was exactly as intimidating as his photograph suggested. He was a large man with cold eyes and an accent that made every word sound like a threat. Mrs. Mitchell, you have something that belongs to me. I have documentation of crimes you committed, Mr. Kozlov. That's not the same thing. Your father made the same mistake. He thought he could interfere with my business operations without consequences. So you killed him. Your father was investigating transactions that were none of his concern. He made choices that put his family at risk. The confession was exactly what the FBI needed, and Victor's implicit threat against Sarah and Sophia was enough to justify immediate arrest. Mr. Kozlov, you've just admitted to murder and threatened a federal witness, Agent Reyes said, emerging from behind a nearby pillar with his gun drawn. You're under arrest. As Victor was handcuffed and led away, Sarah felt a closure she hadn't expected. The man who had killed her father and orchestrated her husband's betrayal was finally going to face justice. But the story wasn't over. As Sarah left the restaurant, Victoria Sterling approached her on the sidewalk. Sarah, we need to talk. There are things about this situation you still don't understand. I understand enough. You and your father destroyed my family for money. My father destroyed your family for revenge, Sarah. But I never wanted you to get hurt. I want to help you take him down completely. The enemy of my enemy proposition that Victoria was offering would lead to the most unexpected alliance of Sarah's life and to discoveries that would change everything she thought she knew about her father's death and her husband's susceptibility to manipulation. The resilience that Sarah had been building through months of betrayal and recovery was about to be tested in ways she could never have imagined. Victoria Sterling stood on the sidewalk outside the restaurant where her father had just been arrested, looking nothing like the confident interior designer who had destroyed Sarah's marriage. Her perfectly styled hair was disheveled, her expensive makeup was smeared, and her hands were shaking. Sarah, please. 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking for. Sarah looked at the woman who had systematically seduced her husband, stolen her money, and infiltrated her support group. Every instinct told her to walk away, to let the FBI handle Victoria's fate. But something in Victoria's desperation gave Sarah pause. You have 5 minutes. Talk. My father has been planning this revenge against your family for 26 years. But Sarah, he didn't tell me about your father's murder until last week. I thought this was just about money laundering and asset acquisition. You expect me to believe you didn't know your father was a killer. I grew up knowing my father was involved in questionable business practices, but I thought it was just financial crime. White-collar stuff. I didn't know he had killed anyone until found those photos of your father in his safe. Sarah studied Victoria's face, looking for signs of deception. The federal empowerment training she had received from Agent Reyes had taught her to recognize when people were lying, and Victoria's distress appeared genuine. Why should I trust anything you say? You seduced my husband as part of a criminal conspiracy. Because I can give you something you want more than revenge against me. I can give you complete destruction of my father's empire and full recovery of everything he stole from your family. Victoria explained that Victor's arrest would only touch the surface of his criminal organization. He had been moving money through dozens of shell companies and legitimate businesses for decades, building a network that would survive his incarceration unless someone with insider knowledge helped investigators dismantle it completely. I have access to his private files, his offshore account numbers, his contact list of corrupt officials and business partners. I can help the FBI trace every dollar he's stolen and every life he's destroyed. What's in it for you? Immunity from prosecution and a new identity. The FBI has offered me witness protection in exchange for my cooperation. But I also want something else. I want to help you build something that will last longer than my father's criminal empire. Sarah, your consulting business could become a national organization helping thousands of women. I have connections in business and finance that could make that happen. The moral lessons on resilience that Dr. Martinez had been teaching Sarah suddenly felt relevant in an unexpected way. Sometimes healing required working with people who had hurt you, not because they deserved forgiveness, but because cooperation served a larger purpose. Victoria, I need to understand something. Did you ever feel anything real for James, or was it all manipulation? Victoria's expression softened with what appeared to be genuine regret. At first, it was purely strategic. James was a target, nothing more. But after a few months, I started to see why you loved him. He's a good man who got caught up in something he didn't understand. He abandoned his pregnant wife for you. He abandoned his pregnant wife because my father and I made him believe that you didn't appreciate him, that you were holding him back from his potential. We played on his midlife insecurities and his desire to feel important. Sarah thought about James sitting in jail awaiting trial for his unwitting participation in money laundering. The husband who had betrayed her was also, in many ways, another one of Victor's victims. Victoria, if I agree to work with you, I have conditions. Name them. First, you will have no contact with James while he's awaiting trial. Second, you will return every dollar that came from marital assets. Third, you will provide a full confession detailing exactly how you manipulated him. Agreed. And fourth, you will use your business connections to help me build a consulting firm that puts women like you out of business forever. The unlikely alliance between Sarah and Victoria began that very afternoon. Victoria's knowledge of her father's business operations combined with Sarah's analytical skills and the FBI's investigative resources created a formidable force for dismantling Victor's criminal empire. Sarah's first client referred through Victoria's connections was Rebecca Chen, a tech executive whose husband had been stealing from her startup to fund his affair with his secretary. Mrs. Chen, your husband didn't just betray you personally. He committed embezzlement that could destroy your business and put your employees out of work, Sarah explained during their consultation. But we can trace exactly where your money went and develop a strategy for both personal and professional recovery. The business breakthrough that came from helping Rebecca recover her stolen assets and save her company proved that Phoenix Rising Consulting could serve a much larger market than Sarah had originally envisioned. Sarah, Victoria said as they reviewed the financial documents from Rebecca's case. There are hundreds of women in similar situations in this city alone. Tech executives, medical professionals, small business owners, successful women whose partners are stealing from them in sophisticated ways. You think we should expand the business model? I think we should franchise it. Take Phoenix Rising National with licensed consultants in every major city offering the same services to women dealing with financial abuse. The support network expansion that began with Sarah's original support group was evolving into something much more ambitious. Maria had developed a digital forensics curriculum for training other women in asset investigation. Beth had created a legal resource database that could be replicated in other cities. Claire had designed a business model for sustainable consulting practices. Ladies, Sarah announced at their weekly meeting, I want to discuss something that might change all of our lives. Sarah presented the plan for national expansion of Phoenix Rising Consulting, with each of the original support group members becoming regional directors responsible for training and supporting other women's recovery. Think about it, Sarah said. We could help thousands of women avoid the kind of devastation we've all experienced. We could create a network of survivors who become advocates and protectors for other women. The cultural reference to Erin Brockovich that Sarah had embraced months earlier felt more relevant than ever. She was no longer just an ordinary woman taking on powerful, corrupt men. She was becoming a leader in a movement that could change how society responded to financial abuse. But as Phoenix Rising Consulting's success grew, so did the danger. Victor's criminal network included people who were still free, still operating, and increasingly desperate to stop Sarah's cooperation with federal investigators. Sarah, we have a problem, Agent Reyes called to warn her. Victor's associates have been asking questions about you and your baby. We think they may be planning to use threats against Sophia to pressure you into stopping your cooperation with our investigation. The decision to accept FBI protection for herself and Sophia was easy, but the decision about what to do with the information Victoria had provided was more complex. Sarah now had access to financial records that could destroy dozens of legitimate businesses that had unknowingly been used for money laundering. Agent Reyes, some of these businesses have innocent employees who will lose their jobs if we expose their owners' criminal activities. Sarah, that's not your responsibility. Your responsibility is to help us stop criminals and protect other potential victims. The emotional hook that would define the next phase of Sarah's journey came in an unexpected form, a phone call from James. Sarah, I need to warn you about something. Victor's people have been visiting me in jail. They're planning something that could put you and Sophia in immediate danger. What kind of something? They know about your consulting business, about the women you're helping. They think if they can destroy your credibility and your business, they can undermine your testimony against Victor. How would they destroy my credibility? Sarah, they have videos of us in our bedroom from when we were still married. Victoria had cameras installed in our house months ago. The revelation that her most private moments with James had been recorded and could be used to humiliate her felt like the cruelest violation yet. But instead of feeling defeated, Sarah felt something. She recognized the familiar anger that had fueled her transformation from victim to warrior. James let them release the videos. I'm not ashamed of loving my husband or of trying to save my marriage. If they think they can destroy me with evidence of intimacy and vulnerability, they're about to learn how wrong they are. The resilience that Sarah had built through months of betrayal and recovery had transformed her into someone who could face any humiliation, any threat, any challenge. The pregnant wife, who had once been devastated by her husband's abandonment, had become a woman who could turn even the most personal attacks into fuel for her mission. The empire that Victor had spent decades building was about to face an opponent he had never encountered before, a mother who had nothing left to lose and everything to gain. The FBI's Financial Crimes Unit had never seen anything quite like the dismantling of Viktor Kozlov's criminal empire. With Victoria's insider knowledge and Sarah's analytical skills, federal investigators were able to trace money laundering operations spanning 3 decades in 5 countries. Mrs. Mitchell, your cooperation has led to the largest asset recovery in this district's history, Agent Reyes announced during a briefing at the federal building. We've frozen over $200 million in assets and identified 37 shell companies used for laundering money from drug trafficking, human trafficking, and arms dealing. Sarah stood at the conference room window holding 6-month-old Sophia, watching the city skyline where her husband's real estate empire had once seemed so impressive. Now she understood that James's success had been built on a foundation of criminality that he had never recognized. Agent Reyes, what happens to the legitimate businesses that were unknowingly used for money laundering? That's where your consulting firm becomes even more valuable. Many of these businesses were owned by entrepreneurs who were manipulated the same way your husband was. They'll need exactly the kind of asset recovery and reputation rehabilitation services that Phoenix Rising provides. The business triumph that Sarah had never imagined was taking shape. Her consulting firm had grown from a one-woman operation focused on helping betrayed wives to a regional organization serving any individual or business that had been victimized by financial predators. Sarah, Victoria said as they reviewed the FBI's asset recovery list, "There's something else we need to discuss. The forfeited assets from my father's organization are going to be auctioned by the government. You could purchase James's former properties for cents on the dollar." The irony was almost too perfect. Sarah could literally buy back the empire that James had stolen from her, acquiring it at a fraction of its value through the legal proceedings that resulted from her own testimony against the criminals who had manipulated him. Victoria, I want you to understand something. I'm not doing this for revenge against James. I'm doing this because these properties represent resources that can be used to help other families recover from financial abuse. The master strategy that Sarah had been developing went far beyond personal recovery. She was building a sustainable organization that could generate income through real estate investments while using those profits to provide free services to women who couldn't afford private consulting. Sarah, Maria said during their weekly meeting, "You've created something incredible here. Phoenix Rising owns properties worth millions of dollars, employs 37 women, and has helped over 200 families recover stolen assets. And we're just getting started," Sarah replied, looking around the conference room of their new headquarters, located in the same building where James used to have his office. "Beth, what's the status of our franchise applications?" Beth had been working with attorneys to develop a licensing model that would allow Phoenix Rising consultants to operate in cities across the country. "We have approved applications for Chicago, Denver, Seattle, and Atlanta. Each franchise will be run by women who have survived financial abuse and completed our certification program." Claire had developed a training curriculum that combined practical investigation techniques with therapeutic support for both consultants and clients. The beauty of this model is that it creates career opportunities for survivors while providing services to women who are still in crisis. The bought his empire back element of Sarah's story had evolved into something much more meaningful than personal vindication. She had used the destruction of Victor's criminal organization to build something that would protect other families from similar devastation. But the climactic confrontation that would define Sarah's complete victory was still to come. James was released from federal custody after serving 6 months in exchange for his cooperation with the investigation. His testimony about Victor and Victoria's manipulation had been crucial for securing convictions, and the federal prosecutor had agreed that James was more useful as a witness than as a defendant. "Sarah, I know I have no right to ask for your forgiveness," James said when he arrived at Phoenix Rising's headquarters to return some of Sarah's personal belongings that had been held as evidence. "But I need you to know that I understand now how completely I was manipulated. James, I'm not interested in relitigating our marriage. I'm interested in making sure this never happens to another family. That's what I want to talk to you about. Sarah, I want to help." James explained that his real estate license had been suspended pending ethical review, but that his knowledge of property development and business operations could be valuable to Phoenix Rising's expansion plans. "I'm not asking you to forgive me or take me back. I'm asking you to let me contribute to what you're building here." Sarah looked at the man who had once been her husband, noting how much he had changed during his months in custody. The arrogance and entitlement that had made him vulnerable to Victoria's manipulation had been replaced by something that looked like genuine humility. "James, I'll consider allowing you to volunteer with our business development committee, but only under specific conditions. Name them. You will have no decision-making authority. You will undergo psychological counseling to address the personal issues that made you susceptible to manipulation. And you will never have any contact with our clients without supervision." The resolution building that Sarah was orchestrating wasn't about reconciliation. It was about demonstrating that even people who had caused tremendous harm could find ways to contribute to healing if they were willing to do the work of genuine accountability. Victoria's final betrayal came when the FBI revealed that she had been working with federal investigators for almost a year before approaching Sarah. "Mrs. Mitchell Victoria Sterling contacted us 18 months ago, shortly after her father told her about your father's murder," Agent Reyes explained. "She's been gathering evidence against him ever since, but she needed someone with access to James's financial records to make the case airtight." "You're saying she used me to build her case against her father. We're saying she recognized that you were the key to stopping him, and she was willing to sacrifice her relationship with your husband to make that happen." Sarah felt a complex mix of anger and admiration. Victoria had manipulated James and destroyed Sarah's marriage, but she had also taken enormous personal risks to stop a killer and bring down a criminal empire. "Agent Reyes, where is Victoria now?" "Witness protection. She'll never be able to use her real identity again, but she's alive, and Victor will spend the rest of his life in federal prison." The emotional hook that had sustained Sarah through months of betrayal and recovery was finally being satisfied. Victor Kozlov, the man who had killed her father and orchestrated her family's destruction, would never again be able to hurt anyone. But the story wasn't over. As Sarah stood in her penthouse office looking out over the city, where she now owned more real estate than James had ever controlled, her assistant brought her a package that had been delivered by courier. Inside the package were photographs of her father and documents that revealed the final piece of the puzzle. Her father hadn't just been investigating Victor's money laundering operations. He had been working with federal law enforcement to build a case against an entire network of Eastern European criminals operating in American cities. The note attached to the documents was brief but chilling. "Your father's work is finished. Victor is in prison, but the network he built is still operating. Your daughter's generation deserves better. The game isn't over. A friend." As Sarah read the note, she realized that her victory over Victor was just the first battle in a larger war. The empire she had built from the ashes of her betrayal would need to become something even more powerful and far-reaching than she had originally envisioned. Looking down at Sophia, who was sleeping peacefully in her office playpen, Sarah made a decision that would determine the next phase of her life. She was going to expand Phoenix Rising into an organization capable of taking on not just individual predators, but entire criminal networks that targeted vulnerable families. The financial recovery that had begun with Sarah's personal devastation was evolving into a mission that would honor her father's sacrifice and protect her daughter's future. 2 years after Viktor Kozlov's conviction, Sarah Mitchell stood on the balcony of her penthouse office holding 3-year-old Sophia and watching the sunset paint the city skyline in shades of gold and crimson. The Phoenix Rising Foundation, now operated in 15 cities, had helped over 2,000 families recover stolen assets and employed more than 200 survivors of financial abuse. "Mama, look at the pretty lights," Sophia said, pointing at the office buildings where lights were beginning to twinkle in the gathering dusk. "Yes, baby. Those lights represent thousands of families going home to safe places tonight because of the work we do here." The final victory that Sarah had achieved went far beyond personal revenge or even financial recovery. She had built something that would outlast any individual criminal and protect generations of families from the kind of devastation her own family had experienced. "Sarah," Jenny called from inside the office, "the Netflix people are here for the documentary interview." The media attention that Phoenix Rising had attracted was both a blessing and a responsibility. Sarah's story had inspired other survivors to come forward, but it had also attracted the attention of criminals who saw her organization as a threat to their operations. Mrs. Mitchell, the documentary producer, said, as cameras were set up around the conference table, "When you first discovered your husband's affair, did you ever imagine it would lead to exposing an international money laundering network?" "I thought my world was ending," Sarah replied honestly. "I had no idea it was actually beginning." The interview covered Sarah's journey from betrayed wife to federal witness to successful entrepreneur, but the most important part focused on the other women who had found healing and purpose through Phoenix Rising. Maria had become the organization's director of training, developing curricula that were now used by law enforcement agencies to teach financial crime investigation. Beth led the legal advocacy department, helping victims navigate complex court proceedings. Claire ran the franchise development program, ensuring that Phoenix Rising consultants maintained the highest standards of service and ethical practice. "The most remarkable thing about Phoenix Rising," the producer observed, "is that it transforms victims into advocates. Every woman who receives services is invited to become part of the solution for other women." "That's intentional," Sarah explained. "We believe that healing happens when you move from being someone who was hurt to someone who prevents others from being hurt." Victoria Sterling had kept her promise to help build Phoenix Rising into a national organization. Working through her witness protection identity, she had used her business connections to facilitate partnerships with legitimate companies that wanted to support women's financial empowerment. "Sarah," Victoria said during one of their carefully monitored phone conversations, "the franchise applications are exceeding our capacity to provide training and oversight. You might need to consider international expansion." "Victoria, I want Phoenix Rising to grow, but I never want it to become so large that we lose sight of individual families who need help." The balance between growth and intimacy had become one of Sarah's primary management challenges. Success brought resources and influence, but it also brought complexity and bureaucracy that could interfere with the organization's core mission. James had found his own path to redemption through his volunteer work with Phoenix Rising's Business Development Committee. His real estate expertise had proven valuable for expanding the organization's property portfolio, which now included safe houses for women escaping financial abuse and office buildings that provided affordable space for other nonprofit organizations. "Sarah, I know I can never fully repair the damage I caused," James said during one of their quarterly meetings to discuss Sophia's custody schedule. "But I hope that my work with Phoenix Rising helps protect other families from going through what we went through." Their relationship had evolved into something Sarah had never expected: a cooperative partnership focused on their daughter's well-being and their shared commitment to Phoenix Rising's mission. It wasn't marriage, but it was functional and respectful. "James, I want you to know that I forgive you for what happened, not because you deserve forgiveness, but because carrying anger serves no purpose for me or for Sophia." The moral lessons on resilience that Dr. Martinez had taught Sarah years earlier had proven true healing required transforming pain into purpose, and purpose created meaning that transcended individual suffering. Dr. Martinez had become Phoenix Rising's Director of Therapeutic Services, ensuring that both clients and staff received the mental health support necessary for sustainable recovery. "Sarah, you've created something unprecedented," Dr. Martinez said during their annual strategic planning retreat, "an organization that provides comprehensive services while also serving as a model for transforming trauma into social change." The Still I Rise Foundation that Sarah had named after Maya Angelou's poem had grown beyond anything she had originally envisioned. The foundation funded research into financial abuse, lobbied for stronger legal protections for victims, and provided scholarships for women pursuing business and law degrees. The most important thing we've learned, Sarah told the documentary cameras, is that financial abuse is never just about money. It's about power and control. When we help women recover their financial independence, we're helping them recover their agency and their dignity. As the documentary crew finished their interviews and began packing up their equipment, Sarah received the phone call that would define the next chapter of her life. Mrs. Mitchell, this is Senator Patricia Rodriguez from California. I'm calling about the Financial Abuse Prevention Act that's currently before Congress. Senator Rodriguez explained that federal legislation had been introduced that would require banks to provide additional protections for accounts held by vulnerable individuals, mandate reporting of suspicious financial activity in domestic relationships, and provide funding for organizations like Phoenix Rising. Mrs. Mitchell, your testimony before Congress could be crucial for getting this legislation passed. Would you be willing to come to Washington? The invitation to testify before Congress felt like the culmination of everything Sarah had built since her world collapsed in that suburban driveway 3 years earlier. The pregnant wife betrayed by her husband's affair had become a national advocate for financial justice. But as Sarah celebrated this milestone with her team, she received the mysterious package that would remind her that some battles never truly end. The package contained photographs of Viktor Kozlov in federal prison, but he wasn't alone. He was meeting with visitors who appeared to be conducting business, suggesting that his criminal network was still operating despite his incarceration. More disturbing were photographs of Sophia playing in the daycare center at Phoenix Rising's headquarters, taken from what appeared to be a considerable distance with a telephoto lens. The note attached to the photographs was brief but clear. Victor's son is continuing the family business. Your work has made you valuable enemies. Protect what matters most. A friend. As Sarah read the note, she realized that her victory over Victor was just the first chapter in a larger story. The empire she had built to protect families from financial predators had made her a target for the next generation of criminals who saw her organization as a threat to their operations. But instead of feeling afraid, Sarah felt the familiar surge of determination that had carried her through every previous challenge. She had built Phoenix Rising from nothing, transforming her own devastation into a force for protecting other families. If Victor's Hwapinin wanted to continue his father's legacy of destruction, he would discover that Sarah Mitchell had built something far more powerful than anything the Kozlov family had ever created. Standing on her penthouse balcony as darkness fell over the city, holding Sophia close and watching the lights that represented thousands of families living safely because of Phoenix Rising's work, Sarah made a decision that would define the next phase of her mission. She was going to expand Phoenix Rising into an international organization capable of taking on criminal networks wherever they operated. The pregnant wife betrayed by her husband's affair had become something far more powerful, a mother building a legacy of protection that would shield her daughter's generation from the kind of evil that had destroyed previous generations of her family. The happy ending that Sarah had achieved wasn't a conclusion. It was a foundation for even greater victories ahead. The Phoenix had risen from the ashes of betrayal and was ready to soar higher than ever before. Looking down at the city she now helped protect, Sarah smiled as she thought about the words that had sustained her through her darkest moments. Still I rise. The rise was far from over. 5 years after Viktor Kozlov's conviction, Phoenix Rising had become more than an organization. It had become a movement. The foundation operated in 22 countries, had helped over 50,000 families recover from financial abuse, and had trained more than 3,000 professional advocates. Sarah's memoir, Bought and Sold: A Wife's Journey to Reclaim Her Life, had spent 43 weeks on the New York Times bestseller list and had been translated into 18 languages. The proceeds funded Phoenix Rising's international expansion and provided full scholarships for survivors pursuing graduate degrees in business law and social work. But the most meaningful measure of Sarah's success wasn't found in statistics or accolades. It was found in moments like the one she experienced on a Tuesday morning in her penthouse office, when 8-year-old Sophia burst through the door with a drawing she had made at school. "Mama, I drew our family," Sophia announced, spreading the colorful artwork across Sarah's desk. The drawing showed Sarah and Sophia standing in front of a large building with Phoenix Rising written across the top in careful third-grade lettering. But what made Sarah's heart swell was the inclusion of all the other figures Sophia had drawn around them. Jenny Maria, Beth Claire, Dr. Martinez, and even James, all connected by a rainbow that arched over the entire scene. "This is beautiful, sweetheart. Tell me about all these people." "They're our family," Sophia said matter-of-factly. "Not the kind of family where everyone lives in the same house, but the kind where everyone takes care of each other." Sarah realized that her daughter understood something profound about love and loyalty that transcended traditional definitions. Sophia was growing up in a world where family meant commitment and support rather than biological connection or legal obligation. "Mama," Sophia continued, "Mrs. Martinez says you help people who are sad become strong. Is that true?" "Yes, baby. Sometimes people get hurt by someone they trusted, and we help them remember how powerful they really are. When I grow up, I want to help people remember how powerful they are too." As Sarah hugged her daughter, she knew that the legacy she had built from the ashes of betrayal would continue long after she was gone. Sophia was growing up understanding that strength came from helping others, that success meant creating opportunity for people who had been hurt, and that the greatest victory was building something that protected future generations. The phoenix had risen, and she had taught her daughter to fly. The story that had begun with a devastating discovery in a suburban driveway had become an epic of transformation, justice, and hope. The pregnant wife, betrayed by her husband's affair, had become a force for changing how society protected its most vulnerable members. And in the end, that transformation had been worth every moment of pain, every tear shed, and every battle fought. Sarah Mitchell had not just survived her betrayal, she had used it to build something beautiful and lasting and strong. The empire she had bought back was so much more than real estate and bank accounts. It was an empire of hope built by women who refused to let their wounds become their endings, who chose instead to transform their scars into sources of strength for others. Still they rise. Still they build. Still they protect. Still they love. And the phoenix continues to soar.